October 25, 2025, Caribbean Sea, United States Pacific Command. Two Venezuelan Su-30 fighter jets have just crossed the red line. From beneath their wings, 4 Kh-31 hypersonic missiles ignite, leaving brilliant trails of fire across the blue horizon. Their single purpose is absolute: to destroy the United States Navy's $2 billion floating fortress, the destroyer USS Thomas Hudner. This is not a drill. This is the story of 20 breathless minutes that would decide survival itself. A moment when a high-tech shield faced a nearly perfect strike. Would it hold? The Caribbean Sea was calm, almost unnaturally so. Then, without warning, the silence broke. Yet this story does not begin with the roar of jet engines. It begins far above the clouds, 350 kilometers above the Earth, in the frozen darkness of orbit, where an unblinking eye watched it all unfold. The KH-11 reconnaissance satellite, a marvel of human engineering capable of reading a license plate from space, observed every motion at Venezuela's La Orchila Air Base, every vehicle, every flicker of exhaust, every shimmer of heat on the runway. The images it transmitted were not ordinary surveillance frames. They revealed two Su-30 Mk2 Flanker G fighters being prepared for combat. Each was powered by twin AL-31FP engines, thrust-thrust vectoring power plants that allowed maneuvers no human pilot should survive. These aircraft represented the peak of fourth-and-a-half-generation fighter design, and beneath their wings hung something unmistakable, a weapon that carried its own political message of defiance: the KH-31 supersonic anti-ship missile. To much of the world, the Caribbean is paradise, but beneath that postcard surface lies a region where politics and power collide. Venezuela, determined to assert its sovereignty and challenge the constant presence of the United States Navy, had chosen to take an extraordinarily dangerous step. It believed it held a trump card, a surprise strike that could humiliate a global superpower before the eyes of the world. On the map, the boundary between international waters and Venezuelan territorial seas is nothing more than a line of ink. But today, those Su-30s are not flying alongside that line. They are flying directly toward it, intent on testing the resolve of the American ship waiting beyond. Across that invisible border, the USS Thomas Hudner, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, maintains her patrol. She is not merely a ship of steel and circuits. She is a moving fortress, a command center, and above all, she carries the Aegis Combat System, the most advanced defensive shield ever placed upon the sea. Her mission that day is simple: a freedom of navigation patrol, ensuring the world's trade routes remain open. But the United States Navy never operates alone. 500 kilometers away, an E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft circles above the ocean, its massive radar dish spinning like a watchful halo. It is the eye in the sky, feeding a constant flow of encrypted data to the Hudner's Combat Information Center. At 1410 hours, the Hawkeye detects two heat signatures lifting from La Orchila Air Base. Altitude, heading, weapons load, confirmed within seconds, long before the Hudner's own sensors can acquire them. From that instant, from the moment the Venezuelan wheels left the ground, the clock begins to tick. Exactly 20 minutes separate a tense standoff from the possibility of war. A short span of time, but long enough for destiny to take shape. Venezuela believes it is in control, but with every second that passes, its pilots descend deeper into a carefully woven trap. Inside the Hudner's Combat Information Center, the atmosphere is calm, yet razor-tight. This is the ship's brain, the place where metal, code, and instinct merge into one. The NSPY-1DV radar continuously scans invisible frequencies, building a three-dimensional dome of electronic awareness around the destroyer. Suddenly, two new echoes appear: low altitude, high speed, attack formation. They ignore repeated radio calls. Their identification transponders remain silent. The SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite springs to life, analyzing every pulse emitted by the approaching aircraft. Moments later, the voice of the combat information officer cuts through the tension, calm, clear, and absolute. Identity confirmed: two Venezuelan Su-30s armed with KH-31P anti-ship missiles. Bearing 090, distance 50 miles. The data confirms the threat: Russian-made supersonic weapons built specifically to penetrate and destroy ships protected by the Aegis system. Each travels at Mach 3.5, skimming the surface of the sea, nearly invisible until the final seconds of flight. These Su-30s are no longer probing. They are switching radar modes, preparing to lock onto the target. This is not a simulation. This is the real test. And then, it happens. The word every sailor dreads fills the room. Vampire. The code for an incoming enemy missile. On the radar screen, two objects break away from the fighters, accelerating at unimaginable speed. Each one is 5 meters long, packed with fuel and explosives, streaking toward the Hudner at 1,200 meters per second. Venezuela has crossed the red line. It is a calculated provocation, an attempt to challenge the power of the United States at sea. But it is also a fatal misjudgment. The attackers do not know that the Aegis Combat System aboard the Hudner has been tracking them for minutes, predicting every maneuver even before the missiles were launched. The confrontation that follows is no longer between people. It is a battle between algorithms and physics, between speed, precision, and the cold logic of machines. The two KH-31 missiles pass the 50-kilometer mark, closing fast. The first layer of defense activates. The SLQ-32 array hums to life, its antennas casting invisible ripples through the sky. It fires no bullets, yet it strikes first, recording the radar signal from each missile's seeker, distorting it, and sending it back. The goal? Confuse the missile's brain, convince it that the ship is somewhere else entirely. At the same time, the command is given. Deploy decoys! The Mark 36 SRBOC launchers erupt, firing a storm of metallic chaff and brilliant heat flares that flood the radar field with false reflections. For a moment, the sea around the Hudner becomes a shimmering cloud of deception. The real destroyer vanishes behind a wall of light and noise. The result is immediate. One KH-31 takes the bait, veers sharply off course, and crashes into the sea, detonating harmlessly far from the ship. The first threat is gone, but another remains, faster, smarter, and still alive. The first threat was gone, neutralized without a single live round fired. But the danger was not over. The second missile, perhaps programmed with more advanced logic, tore through the electronic illusion. It was not destroyed, but it had been weakened, losing almost 20% of its velocity and precious fuel. Still, it kept coming. A streak of metal and fire locked on to the destroyer. Electronic warfare had worked, but only halfway. It had bought time, not victory. Now, the missile was 30 kilometers out, racing at Mach 3.5. Time to impact, less than 25 seconds. The next layer of defense came alive. The tactical action officer's voice cut through the tension, sharp and cold. Confirm Standard Missile 6 launch. Destroy designated target. On the forward deck, hatches of the Mk-41 vertical launch system split open. From deep within, a single Standard Missile 6 erupted into the sky, a $4 million spear of precision and power. Its booster engine roared, lifting it vertically, then arcing high above the ocean. At 30 kilometers altitude, it pitched down, diving toward the incoming threat at speeds beyond Mach 3.5. Two supersonic adversaries were now on a collision course. 20 kilometers, 15, 10. A flash brighter than the sun tore across the sky. Contact. The KH-31 disintegrated in midair. Shrapnel rained harmlessly into the sea. A $4 million interceptor missile had just saved a $2 billion warship and 300 American lives. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. It seemed Venezuela had fired its last shot, but the calm was a deception. In the smoke of the first explosion, the Venezuelan pilots executed their real plan. Taking advantage of the radar interference and the blinding flash of the SM-6 detonation, both Su-30s launched again. Two more KH-31 missiles streaked away, hidden within the noise and confusion. They slipped through the long-range defense envelope undetected. By the time the Aegis network reacquired them, they were already 15 kilometers out, too close for another Standard missile launch. The ship had 12 seconds to react. Now the fight passed to the next ring of defense, the Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles, or ESSM, the guardians of the medium range. On the deck, more hatches opened. Unlike the massive SM-6, each cell of this launcher held 4 smaller missiles. Dense firepower. 4 ESSMs ignited almost simultaneously, white smoke curling across the horizon as they leapt into the air. The ESSM is pure agility, a compact killer that can reach Mach 4 and endure 50 G-forces thanks to its thrust vectoring control system. It is, in essence, a small unmanned fighter jet. Each missile locks onto its target, adjusting its course hundreds of times per second, guided by semi-active seekers and encrypted mid-course updates. At 12 kilometers, one ESSM found its mark. The third KH-31 vanished in a violent bloom of fire and vapor. The fourth missile was struck as well, but not completely destroyed. Its seeker and guidance system were shredded, yet its heavy warhead kept flying, a 500-kilogram block of uncontrolled metal. 5 kilometers, 5 seconds, 4, 3. The final wall of steel came alive. Close-in weapon system, engage. On the starboard mount, the Phalanx CIWS swiveled into position, its twin-band radar locking on instantly. In less than a second, the onboard computer calculated a firing solution. Then came the sound, a mechanical roar like ripping fabric. The 6-barrel M61 Vulcan Gatling gun spun at full speed, unleashing 4,500 rounds every minute. The gun did not fire explosive shells. It fired solid tungsten penetrators, each one a fragment of raw kinetic energy. The dense stream of metal tore through the tumbling warhead, shredding it into clouds of smaller and smaller fragments, until nothing remained but harmless debris splashing into the water hundreds of meters away. Silence fell over the Combat Information Center. The screens that seconds ago had glowed with red threat icons now showed nothing but blue. The sea was clear. 4 Russian-built KH-31 missiles, the pride of the Venezuelan Air Force, now rested on the floor of the Caribbean Sea as twisted metal. The 2 Su-30s, realizing their failure, banked hard and fled back to base. From the first radar detection to the destruction of the last fragment, the entire battle had lasted less than 90 seconds. The USS Thomas Hudner remained untouched. This was not just a successful defense, it was a declaration, a message to Caracas, and to anyone else who might be watching. Challenging the United States Navy in open waters is not an act of war, it is an act of suicide. The Hudner's crew did not celebrate. They simply reset their systems and resumed the patrol with the same cold professionalism that only thousands of hours of simulation and training can create. As the sun set over the calm Caribbean, the destroyer continued on course. The sea was once again silent. This had not been a crisis, it had been a test, and the United States Navy had passed it with a perfect score. A lesson written in smoke and code, simple, clear, and final. In modern warfare, never challenge those who wrote the rules of the game.